another video. It's been quite a while since I've made any radio videos, but I just felt driven to make something about this this latest receiver that I've just got operating. It's a Watkins Johnson 8737, 1970s type vintage, mid 70s, late 70s. It's a fully analog system other than the synthesized, not synthesized really, it's just a counter readout, but it can be used to lock, and I'll show you later on, the free running VCOs. It's an interesting set, and I've had a look at a lot of these online for many years, and wanted to experiment, have a play, and see exactly what was going on with them. Effectively, Watkins Johnson had throughout the 60s and 70s a tunable head system. So you'd have, in this particular case, it's 4 tuning heads, and each tuning head would cover a different band. This particular one was 20 to 90, 90 to 300, 225 to 500, and 500 to a gig. So the complete box will tune 20 to 1000 megs in 5 separate bands. The way that you would switch between them is literally just by selecting the tuner, and of course the frequency goes to the requisite counter. Above it, and it is in 2 pieces, the upper section can be removed from the upper area. It's a 2U high box and a 1U high box. This had a number of issues with the display and the cabling at the back. There are a couple of multi-way connected cables which, if you haven't got them, you've got to fabricate them, like I did here. And you can get all of the connectors off eBay. I've had to modify a couple of different keyed connectors on this one because they were very cheap, and it's good without modifying the radios. The 0 key was changed, and it's fitted straight in. So I have all the cabling at the back, and so there's a lower unit which is really the receiver, and the upper unit which is both a display unit and also a spectrum display, and it's surprisingly useful, the spectrum display. I do have another Watkins Johnson later version of this, and they are very useful when tuning around, but being purely sort of an analog feel, I was surprised how even more useful it is on this particular set. Now it's fundamentally just got 3 bandwidths, 4 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, and 100, and I think that's pretty much what all of these standard default settings were. I may fiddle around and change this. There's a set of standard boards in the back. I've had obviously the covers off to do the repairs, and absolutely stunning workmanship, is all I can say. I've dug around a number of receivers, worked on a lot of receivers, both professionally and in the hobby, and I will have to say this is, it's gold plated inside. There's enormous amounts of effort made to screen and to filter just about every line and every compartment in the receiver itself. And it's surprisingly well built. I've opened other Watkins Johnson receivers which have a large body and then about 3 PCBs with a lot of wiring between them, but a lot of airspace. Well, this is quite densely populated, this particular set, and I think it was one of the more expensive sets they manufactured in the late 70s. Anyway, I'll give a bit of a tour around the unit. So for the receiver section, which is really the lower section, you've got the 4 tuning heads I talked about. The bowl above them illuminates depending on which band you've actually got selected, and of course you can see the frequency in this case as well. There's a carrier-operated relay squelch system, which just basically is like a standard squelch. The light comes on, and there's a bit of a delay there to keep the tapes running a little bit, as they would have done in the early days. To the right of this, there is an AFC function and a DAFC, which is a digital AFC. Now, I mentioned before that although this is a free-running system, you can actually lock it to a particular frequency, and by fundamentally tuning to the frequency you want. So if you wanted 21,500, you pop the digital on, and it takes it's a fairly slow lock time, but it fundamentally locks to that frequency and will stay there all day and night now on 21.5, and that is locked to the crystal, of course, in the synthesized system. So we'll take that off for the moment. To the right here, we've got a number of different modes: CW, AM manual, AM with AGC, FM, and a pulse mode as well. Pulse is just a fast a fast detector there. Predominantly here I'm sited in Brisbane, so there's not an awful lot of how can I put it, interesting traffic around, but I'll come to a bit of tuning in a moment. So just to the right of it, RFIF gain, and again with AGC that's pretty much doing it. There's a small fine tune which I do find really helps a lot. These very small 1-inch tuners are good for whipping around up and down the band, and to be honest, a little bit of, if it's wideband, tuning in, but a lot of narrowband FM you really have to resolve with a fine tune here. Of course, the band select, and over on the right here is basically the power on audio gain, and in this case I'm running it just to an external Plessy, this little valve amplifier. I've had it for years, I use it on all the radios. It's got about a, say, 600 ohm input and a couple of watts out, and it's a really fun, it's a good unit to use. I've had no problems with it over the years. And of course a video game which is just taking out the IF and the Y band for an external bit of monitoring. Now I'll have a bit of a tune around. Oh, actually, first before I do that, I'll just take you on the display, the panoramic display. This was not functioning. The EHT box had got some corrosion in it, so I cleaned it all out and made it look brand new again, basically. And I'd refitted a few components, and she's up and running. It's a little bit dim, but I like it a bit brighter than that. But it's functioning quite well. You've got the usual vertical and horizontal controls you would have on an oscilloscope, so you center the trace where you want to. There's a focus, of course, which is not really need too much explanation on that. There's an intensity button, which is to the max at the moment. And on the lower section here, we've got like the frequency control. You can call up a raster of markers, which come up about 100 kilohertz in this case. We're currently spanning about 1.5-ish megs. It's not super accurate, but it gives an idea where you are. And you go linear or log, depending whichever flavor you want to run. I'll just leave it in the log mode most of the time. There's a center frequency, and then there's a gain. You can actually adjust the gain to just dig down into the noise. Okay, and of course there's a sweep which I might show a bit later on when we've got some signals on the screen. And now over to the right. This is a very nice display unit. Again, very well laid out, very well screened. There must be I don't know, it looks like 50-odd Tusonics type filters just feeding this through a vault, and the whole thing is well screened, so I guess they're trying to remove any sort of digital hash you can possibly get from the counter. And again, the intensity is it's quite interesting. It's just literally a timer, 555 timer, which, as you can see, it goes super bright. It's just full on basically, and then they strobe it with the timer, so they just bring it down, and it's, I don't know, this time of night it's probably set to leave about mid-strobe. And to the right of that is the phone socket. It's kind of unusual to have the phones on the top. Not quite sure why they didn't put it on the lower section, the lower deck. Maybe it was an afterthought, I don't know. But anyway, the phones is on the top. Now there is a later version of it, a 9000 type unit, which is again a very popular unit. You see, it looks almost identical. It's got a couple of other meters on it, a couple of little features, but fundamentally it was just a little bit more gilding, what relative to what we had here. Okay, so we'll have a bit of a look around, but just on 121.5, which is actually an emergency channel, and there was some talk earlier on. People were listening around, and the local control tower was asking several aircraft to listen. So although we have a 20 to 90 meg band here, the LNA I'm using is one of my own business's LNAs. It has a filter of 50 dB rejection to the band below 118, so it's no much point tuning down to the band. So I'll just have a go through the three bands and see what's what, and I'll explain a little bit more about the receiver. So as you can see, we can see the spectrum on the receiver. We can tune it around. You'll see the frequency megahertz moves quite pleasantly, and we'll go up to, and as you can see, there's a carrier coming in here. Now, as we center that, it should resolve and open the squelch. And we will center that roughly. Now this is, as it says, it's Brisbane. It's the ATIS for Brisbane. I'm trying to get too overpowering. And that's on obviously 24 hours a day, and you can hear the local weather and ground conditions. Now the mode is of course AM for aircraft, and currently set it for 20 kilohertz bandwidth. The frequency is 125/500, and that's just free running at the moment. These are free running VCOs using a spiral, what they call spiral Malloy VCO, and it's incredibly stable. It's stunning to think that this was available, back in the 70s and earlier. You can see there's a few more carriers coming up. These are actually aircraft control tower signals coming up, and we'll just go back to that in a moment. Just wanted to show, while we've got a stable signal, so we can go down to 4 kilohertz. A bit more hissy, and although it goes to 100 kilohertz, you don't hear much. There's an audio filter which stops it getting too wide, but RF wise it does go wider. You can actually hear multiple signals if you leave it in the 100. So we'll just have a quick tune around, and you'll see as I move it, you can see the carrier move around out of band. And I'll also just set that squelch a little bit off before it gets too annoying. There's something there. There's a lot of computer hash here, and the antenna I'm using outside is just a little vertical, not particularly tuned to any frequency. And so I'm just trying to see if there's anything down there. And that does actually pick up quite a lot of stuff, to be honest. It's only about a ½ meter vertical over a ground plane. So that would have been about 128.50. They're all 50 kilohertz, and actually 25 kilohertz in some places.
6116, good day, runway 19, expect the ILS, descend via star to 4000 and you can cancel sweep restrictions.
We can actually lock onto that, but when he goes away the AFC will go hunting. See? I'm trying to find out, so that guy's back again. Let's just have a look at this ATIS, and I'll just show you that AFC lock. So we can go off channel and put the AFC on, and she'll lock straight to the carrier. Quite impressive. At least it'll give you an indication. Then you know it's on the 500. You tune up, fine tune, put on the digital AFC, and you can monitor that all day. Very nice, very nice, very user friendly. Not too many knobs and buttons. It's a good set to scout around on. Obviously, its intended purpose, and so I just turned it down just a shade. Its intended purpose was obviously to look around, monitor, camp on frequencies at time, have a general look to see what's going on in certain parts of the band. Which, without further ado, I'll just go further up the band and have a look what else we've got. So I just touch this squelch again, and as we go up into the higher bands, see there's there you go. That's the ACARS data, aircraft data coming through. And as we go up through the VHF sort of weather band, weather satellite frequencies, occasionally you'll see one come through, and it'll be up out of the noise. I'll just turn it down a little bit. A lot of computer noise, a lot of hash in suburbia here, which makes certainly weaker signals very difficult to copy. And we go through the amateur bands. There's not a lot happening there. I don't know if that's going to wake up. That might have been. There he is. We might get a lock on that. There he is. So that's obviously 2 meters, and it may be a repeater input. I'll just we'll just wait till he hands it back. But you might even see the carrier. No, that's a simplex channel. I've lost him now. He's not lifting the squelch. Isn't that the way? So it's good on AM, it's good on FM, it's good fidelity, should we say, for no better word. And we'll come up through the amateur bands. I won't waste too much. As we go back to 148, we'll hear a lot of the pages come up. So these guys are on you can see the AGC action with the noise floor. They're so strong. They bend the meter over here. And we'll keep going up through the VHF bands. Australia is one quiet place, I'll have to say. Let's just see what we've got here. Okay, this is one of the community radio stations. Sounds like it's Chinese or Vietnamese. Then there's another one here. Some Christian station. Ironically, later on they'll have some Middle Eastern Islamic talking. It's obviously a religious broadcast station. Right, we'll just turn that off. I'll keep going further up band. See what else we can hear. Now, again, it looked like it was a... There we go. Who are these people? It's, the squelch is very sensitive. So we'll say it's coarse, not sensitive. It's coarse, but it requires a very fine, just on the cusp. Okay, I thought we might have got someone there, but I'm not going to. It looks like the VHF Marine Band. I'm near the coast here, so they often pop in. Anyway, what else have we got here? Data. More data. More data. We're going at 167. More data. And you see there's a few areas. And here we go into the TV band. This is a digital TV. You can see on the scope the effective wideband noise plateau of the DTV signal. And you see it between the two bands. The next band, we keep tuning. It's so wide, it's outside the scope of the... and we got the third. There's the third band. Then we go up further and we see there's digital DAB comes in a bit further up. I remember, yes, here we go, there's DAB coming in. And we can keep going up 200 megahertz. And before long we hit the, what we used to call the mill satcom band. And I'll just turn up the gain a little bit, see if we can see anything in the band. Around about 250 to 270 is a lot of UHF. Sats. Now again, it's just a small quarter wave I've got here, so it's not going to be that great. You really need a small, obviously cut prime focus dish if you can find one. Just keep going through. There's a few things moving around in the noise, but not much tonight. No, occasionally when the conditions are right, I'll see some carriers there, but not much tonight. So we're looking at band 2 at the moment, so it's up to 300 megs. We can now go on to band 3, which fundamentally is like the UHF PMR band and the old UHF air band. There is some work. There's a government frequency 300 to 400 now as well, networks. But you can see the this band is very well populated. Now the tuners are all the two low frequency tuners are very similar. They just directly connect to the spiral inductor. However, there's actually a two-step process with this. You can feel it. There's a slow moving, and then it hits an end stop, and then it moves it very fast. So you can bring something in and then just slowly move around it. It's an interesting feel. It takes bigger than you used to, and you sometimes have to, if you haven't got it set in quite the right place, you have to drive through it and then back up onto the signal. But you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. And now I've got a few carriers on. I can show you the way it can span right out, or you can get right in on a carrier and almost have a look at it. In fact, it might be easier to have a look at what's going on. Not so exciting on a bit of broadband QPSK, but let's try bring that back to a wider band setting again. And we'll keep going up and see what else we've got. There's obviously the CB bands in Australia at 7476, and it's going to be a little bit crude. I don't know if there's anything going on here tonight. So we can get into it. There it is. So now we can AFC it on. So as usual, it's one of the local repeaters, and it can be. Oh, got the AFC left on there. It can be a little bit naughty. So again, UHF, very good, and we're up at 500 megs. Now there's not a lot to show and sail on the higher band. You can see on the scope there, and we'll just turn the gain up a little bit. There's not a lot to see. You see the carriers bring that down. This is all cellular radio. 800. Then we drop down into pages and the alike, and some a fair few things going on there. But as we get further, low frequency, we'll start to see the old LTE come through when we get to the 700s. There you are there. Very strong. It's just the full band of noise. So you can see the edge of the signals there. And that's about it. I'll just turn that. Just turn that off there. So, Watkins Johnson 8737. This particular serial number, for those people who know, is 61. Not sure how many of these are actually made. Probably a few hundred, I would guess. Before it became the, I think it's a 90. I want to say 42, but it was a later version of this, which looked identical and was marketed throughout the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And again was one of the more expensive units they had. The condition of this when I got it was cosmetically pretty good. The knobs needed replacing here. These are cracked and bent and twisted, and with a bit of judicious warming and moving of the spindles, they got them all straight again. And I just bought a set of like Raytheon type knobs here for this at the moment. I may end up, if I get hold of the white knobs, replacing those at some point, but it looks quite tidy as it is. They use a very small bulb in each of these band indicators, and they are again readily available. Most of the equipment is still available for this. I would show you a picture of the back of the unit, but it's really 3 BNC cables to BNC, and then 2 multi-way cables. One is a 15, and the other is a 10, if I remember rightly. It's a while since I've wired this up. And as I say, you can get these connectors off eBay or search around for them. It took me a couple of weeks to find the 4 I needed, and I've got 2 fitted, and I've got the loose ends just onto pins at the moment into the requisite sockets. But I do have the other 2, which so the units can be completely dismantled. But superb build inside. All I can tell you is it's an amazingly well built unit. Certainly will never see anything like this again. It would have required tremendous manufacturing skill set to have produced this, a skill set we've lost in the last 20 years, to mass production and single PCB builds. So which is fair, you know, we all move forward. But it's interesting to look at craftsmanship and the skill set that they would have taken to have built this. If I'd had the time, I'd have taken a few snaps of the inside, but it was absolutely beautiful workmanship. Okay, so that's the Watkins Johnson 8737, and any questions, then post them on YouTube, and I'll see if I can answer you. Thank you much for watching.